The candlelight flickered across my wife's face as she smiled that particular smile, the one she reserved for moments when she thought she was being clever. I should have known something was wrong when Lana suggested Romano's for our anniversary. In 15 years of marriage, she'd never picked anywhere that required reservations more than a week out. "Wes, darling, I hope you don't mind, but I invited someone to join us tonight." Her voice carried that honeyed tone she used when she was about to spring something on me. "It's such a coincidence. Peter's in town for business?" The name hit me like a slap. Peter Bowen, the hedge fund golden boy who dated my wife through college and somehow managed to stay in her orbit ever since. I watched him approach our table, all expensive suit and practiced charm, moving through Romano's like he owned the place. "Wes, great to see you, buddy." Peter's handshake was firm, confident, the grip of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. He settled into the chair across from me without waiting for an invitation. I'm an IT security consultant, which means I spend my days looking for patterns others miss, finding the cracks in systems people think are bulletproof. Right now, every instinct I'd developed over 20 years in the business was screaming that something was very wrong with this picture. "What a wonderful surprise," I said, keeping my voice level. "Lana didn't mention you'd be joining us." "Last-minute thing," Peter replied, already signaling the waiter. "I was having drinks at the bar when I saw you two. Couldn't resist saying hello on such a special night." The lie was smooth, practiced, but I'd seen Peter check his watch twice since sitting down, and his drink was barely touched. Not the behavior of a man who'd been casually nursing cocktails at the bar. Lana's hand found mine across the table. "Isn't this nice? The three of us together again." Again. The word hung in the air like smoke. When exactly had the three of us been together before? Peter and I had met perhaps half a dozen times in 15 years, always at large gatherings where conversation never went beyond pleasantries and sports scores. "Absolutely," I agreed, reaching into my jacket pocket. "In fact, this gives me a chance to ask Peter something I've been curious about." I pulled out a small leather notebook, the kind lawyers use for depositions. For the past 3 years, I'd been keeping what I privately called my manipulation journal. Every time Lana said something that didn't quite add up, every story that changed in the telling, every small inconsistency that nagged at me, I wrote it down. Dates, direct quotes, witnesses present. Call it paranoia, call it preparation. In my line of work, documentation saves careers. Peter's eyes flicked to the notebook, and I caught something, a flash of recognition, maybe concern. "Interesting. You know, Peter, Lana mentioned you've been helping her understand some of the finer points of investment law lately." I opened the notebook to a page I'd marked 3 weeks ago. Specifically, she used a phrase about survivorship clauses in marital trusts that seemed pretty sophisticated for someone who usually leaves the finances to me. Lana's grip on my hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm curious," I continued, meeting Peter's gaze directly, "about the specific language she mentioned. Something about how assets transfer when one spouse is declared legally incompetent versus when they're simply absent." The question hung between us like a challenge. It was specific, technical, and completely fabricated. I'd made up the entire scenario to see how Peter would respond. He didn't hesitate. "Oh, that's a common misconception. The Uniform Probate Code actually requires a 7-year absence period unless there's a specific competency hearing. But with the right documentation, you can expedite the process significantly." My pen stopped moving across the page. The answer was detailed, confident, and completely wrong. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. It was the fact that he'd answered at all. A normal person, someone who hadn't been discussing my wife's finances, would have asked for clarification or admitted they weren't sure about such a specific legal question. Peter had responded like someone who'd been thinking about exactly this scenario. "That's fascinating," I said, making a note. "And this is something you and Lana have discussed recently?" "Well, not specifically," Peter started, then caught himself. "I mean, these things come up in general conversation about estate planning." Another lie. I could see it in the way his eyes shifted to Lana, looking for guidance. She was staring at her wine glass like it held the secrets of the universe. My phone buzzed against my leg. I ignored it, focused on the tableau in front of me. Lana's carefully applied makeup couldn't quite hide the tension around her eyes. Peter was checking his watch again, not the casual glance of someone enjoying an unexpected dinner, but the focused attention of a man on a schedule. The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. "Excuse me," I said, pulling it out. "Work emergency." The notification wasn't from work. It was from my bank's mobile app, a transfer alert. Someone had initiated a transaction on our joint trust account. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m. I glanced at my watch. 8:49. The transfer was for $250,000, nearly everything we had in long-term savings. The destination account was listed only as a routing number I didn't recognize. I looked up at my wife and her college boyfriend, both watching me with expressions that suddenly seemed less like concern and more like anticipation. "Everything all right?" Lana asked. "Just fine," I said, closing the phone and slipping it back into my pocket. "Actually, better than fine. I think this is turning out to be a very educational evening." Peter shifted in his chair. "Maybe I should let you two get back to your anniversary dinner." "Nonsense," I replied, raising my wine glass. "The night is young, and I'm just getting started." The waiter appeared at Peter's elbow like he'd been summoned by telepathy. Young guy, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of sharp attention to detail that comes from working high-end establishments. His name tag read Marcus. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Bowen?" the waiter asked. I felt my eyebrows rise. "Mr. Bowen?" Peter had supposedly wandered over from the bar on impulse, but the staff already knew his name. Either Peter was a more regular customer at Romano's than he'd let on, or this evening had been planned in advance. "Actually, Marcus," I said, "I'm curious about something. What time did Mr. Bowen make his reservation tonight?" The waiter's eyes darted between Peter and Lana. I'm not sure I understand." "Simple question. Did he book a table for tonight, or did he just happen to be here?" "Wes," Lana interjected, "what are you doing?" "Having a conversation with my wife and her friend," I replied evenly. "Marcus, I'd appreciate an answer." The young man's discomfort was obvious. "Mr. Bowen called this afternoon to confirm the arrangement." "Arrangement, not reservation. Arrangement." Peter's jaw tightened. "Look, Wes, if you're upset about the surprise—" "Upset?" I laughed, opening my notebook again. "I'm not upset at all. I'm fascinated. See, I've been keeping track of some interesting patterns lately." I flipped to a page dated 6 weeks earlier. October 15th. Lana mentions she's been talking to an old friend about investment strategies. October 22nd, she asks me about the details of our trust structure, specifically what would happen to our assets if something happened to me. Lana's face had gone pale beneath her foundation. Those were just normal financial planning conversations. Were they? I turned the page. October 28th. You tell me you're working late, but when I call your office, they say you left at 3. November 2nd, you ask me if I've updated my emergency contacts recently. November 8th, this is a good one, you suggest I should consider getting a physical, because I've been looking tired lately. I looked up at both of them. Individually, these might seem like the concerns of a caring wife, but when you map them out chronologically, they start to look like someone building a case. Peter leaned back in his chair. Building a case for what? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. Maybe you can help me understand this transfer that just went through. $250,000 moved out of our joint account about 10 minutes ago. Lana's wine glass slipped from her fingers, sending red wine across the white tablecloth. I don't know what you're talking about. The timestamp is interesting, I continued, showing them the screen. The transaction was initiated at 8:47. We sat down at 8:30. Peter arrived at 8:45. So either this is the most incredible coincidence in banking history, or someone was waiting for confirmation that I was here, in public, with witnesses, before pulling the trigger. Marcus, the waiter, had backed away from our table, clearly sensing the shift in atmosphere. Other diners were starting to glance our way, drawn by the tension that was becoming impossible to hide. You're being paranoid, Lana said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Let me test that theory. I turned to Peter. Since you're so knowledgeable about trust law, maybe you can explain something. The account that money was transferred to, would you happen to know the routing number? Peter's silence was answer enough. Here's what I think happened, I said, keeping my voice conversational despite the rage building in my chest. I think my loving wife has been planning to divorce me for months, but instead of doing it the honest way, she decided to get creative. Maybe claim I was having some kind of mental health crisis. Maybe suggest I was becoming financially irresponsible. Build a case that I was no longer competent to manage our assets. I gestured to Peter. And who better to help with that than a hedge fund manager who knows all the tricks for moving money around quickly and quietly? That's ridiculous, Lana snapped, but there was panic in her eyes now. Is it? Because I've been doing some research of my own. I flipped to the back of my notebook. Did you know that Peter's fund has been under SEC investigation for the past 8 months? Something about suspicious transfers and undisclosed client relationships. Peter's face went white. How did you? Public records, Peter. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. I leaned forward. I'm guessing you needed money fast, and my wife needed someone with experience in creative accounting. A partnership made in heaven. The restaurant around us had gone quiet. I realized we'd become the evening's entertainment for the other diners, but I was past caring about appearances. The plan was elegant, I'll give you that, I continued. Get me out in public, establish my location, then move the money while I was distracted by this touching reunion. Tomorrow, maybe Lana files some kind of emergency petition claiming I've been acting erratically. She's been documenting my supposed mental decline for weeks. With Peter's help, she could probably make a case that the funds needed to be protected. I closed the notebook with a snap. The only problem is that you both underestimated me. Lana's composure finally cracked. You don't understand. Peter and I are having an affair. Yes, I figured that out too. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. In fact, I've been recording this entire conversation. You can't do that. This is a private conversation. Actually, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording, and since I'm the one party, we're all set. I smiled at both of them. Plus, we're in a public restaurant, so there's no reasonable expectation of privacy anyway. I stood up, leaving money on the table for our untouched meals. Here's what's going to happen. Peter, you're going to reverse that transfer immediately. Every penny, back in the account it came from. Lana, you're going to call your lawyer and explain that there's been a change of plans. And if we don't? Peter asked. Then this recording goes to the SEC, the State Attorney General, and every financial news outlet in the city. I'm sure they'd be very interested in hearing about a hedge fund manager's side business in marital fraud. I picked up my notebook and headed for the door, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. As I walked past Marcus the waiter, I paused. By the way, I said quietly, next time someone pays you to lie about a reservation, you might want to make sure their story holds up under basic questioning. His face went red, confirming what I'd already suspected. This had been planned down to the smallest detail, except for the detail where they'd assumed I was too trusting or too stupid to figure it out. Outside Romano's, I pulled out my phone and checked the banking app again. The transfer was still showing as pending. That meant I had maybe 12 hours before it became irreversible. 12 hours to make sure Peter Bowen and my cheating wife understood exactly what kind of mistake they'd made. My home office felt different when I walked in that night, like a command center instead of the cluttered workspace where I usually debugged network security for corporate clients. For the first time in months, I had a real problem to solve, one that mattered. I fired up my main workstation and opened a dozen browser windows. If Peter and Lana wanted to play games with digital transactions, they'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd spent 20 years learning how money moved through electronic systems, and more importantly, how to track it when people tried to hide the trail. The routing number from the transfer led to a small private bank in Delaware, the kind of institution that specialized in discreet financial services for wealthy clients who valued privacy over transparency. Not illegal, but definitely the sort of place you'd use if you wanted to move money without attracting attention. I cross-referenced the bank's client database with Peter's known business associates. It took 3 hours and some creative use of LinkedIn connections, but I found the link. The account belonged to a shell company called Meridian Holdings, incorporated just 6 weeks ago. The timing wasn't a coincidence. My phone rang at 2 a.m, Lana's number. Wes, we need to talk. I thought we talked quite enough at dinner. This is getting out of hand. Peter says you are threatening him. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the financial records spread across my screens. Threatening him? I simply explained the consequences of stealing from me. That's not a threat, it's a prediction. The money isn't stolen, it's complicated. Enlighten me. There was a long pause. I was going to file for divorce anyway. The money is just securing my future. Our money, Lana. Money we earned together, saved together. You don't get to unilaterally decide it's yours. I've been unhappy for years, Wes. You know that. So you decided to commit fraud instead of hiring a divorce lawyer like a normal person. It's not fraud if what? If you can convince a judge I'm mentally incompetent? If you can make it look like I'm the one who moved the money? I pulled up another screen, showing Peter's recent financial activity. I found the paper trail, Lana. Peter's been planning this for months. The SEC investigation isn't going well for him, is it? He needs cash fast, and you need someone who knows how to hide assets. Very convenient. She was quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. What do you want? She finally asked. I want my money back in the account where it belongs. I want a signed confession from both of you, and I want Peter out of our lives permanently. And if we do that, you'll keep quiet about everything? I'll consider it. That's not good enough. Then I guess you'd better hope Peter's lawyers are better than his investment strategies. I hung up and went back to work. By sunrise, I'd mapped out the entire scheme. Peter had been moving money through a network of shell companies for months, trying to stay ahead of the SEC investigation. Lana had been feeding him information about our finances, looking for the right moment to make their move. The beauty of their plan was its simplicity. If I'd been the trusting husband they thought I was, I might never have noticed the money was gone until it was too late to recover. By then, Lana would have filed for divorce, claiming I'd been acting erratically and making poor financial decisions. Peter would have been long gone with our savings, and I'd have been left trying to prove a negative, but they'd made one critical error. They'd assumed I wouldn't fight back. My phone rang again. This time it was Peter. "We need to meet." "I don't think so." "Wes, you're in over your head here. There are things about this situation you don't understand." "Educate me." "Not over the phone. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe at 10 this morning. Come alone." "Or what?" "Or things get complicated for everyone involved." The line went silent. I stared at the phone, weighing my options. Peter was desperate, which made him dangerous, but also predictable. He needed this money to disappear, and he needed me to stop digging into his business. I checked my security system. Cameras on all approaches to the house, motion sensors, the works. If Peter was planning something stupid, I'd see him coming. But he was right about one thing. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made my next move. I spent the rest of the morning preparing. Backup recordings stored in 3 different cloud services. Copies of all the financial evidence sent to a secure email account that would automatically forward everything to the authorities if I didn't check in every 24 hours. If Peter Bowen wanted to play hardball, I'd show him what 20 years in cybersecurity had taught me about protecting valuable assets. The most valuable asset being myself. Riverside Cafe sat on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where business deals were made over expensive coffee and the staff knew to give certain tables plenty of space. Peter was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall, the position of a man who'd learned to watch for threats. He looked like he hadn't slept. His usual polish was gone, replaced by the haggard appearance of someone under serious pressure. "You came," he said as I slid into the opposite seat. "I'm curious about those complications you mentioned." Peter glanced around the cafe, making sure we weren't being overheard. "The money you're so concerned about getting back, it's already gone." "Gone where?" "Offshore accounts, cryptocurrency exchanges, places where it can't be traced or recovered." He leaned forward. "I needed it to cover some obligations." "SEC obligations?" His face darkened. "Among others. The point is, even if I wanted to return it, I can't. Not immediately." "Then you have a problem." "No, Wes, we have a problem. Because if you keep pushing this, if you go to the authorities with your little recordings and your financial detective work, you're going to destroy more than just me and Lana." I waited for him to continue. "There are other people involved in this. People who invested money with me based on certain assurances. People who don't react well to disappointment." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality. The money I took from your account? It's keeping some very dangerous people from losing much larger sums. If I can't make good on my obligations to them, they're going to look for alternative sources of compensation." Peter pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. My house, taken from the street. The timestamp showed it was captured less than an hour ago. "They know where you live, Wes. They know where you work. They know Lana was my way into your finances, but they don't particularly care about the details. All they care about is results." I studied his face, looking for tells. Peter was scared, genuinely terrified. But there was something else there. Calculation. He was playing an angle, trying to manipulate me with fear. "Who are these dangerous people, Peter? Does it matter? The point is, it matters because you're lying." I pulled out my own phone and opened a news app. "I've been tracking the SEC investigation into your fund. It's not about mysterious criminal investors. It's about you embezzling client money to cover personal debts." Peter's expression shifted, the mask of control slipping. "Your fund has been hemorrhaging money for 2 years," I continued. "Bad investments, risky trades, the usual hedge fund disasters. Instead of admitting failure, you started using new client money to pay returns to existing clients. Classic Ponzi scheme." "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I also know that the investigation is closing in, and you're running out of time to cover the shortfall. That's why you needed Lana, and that's why you needed our money." I leaned back in my chair. "The dangerous people you're so worried about? They're your own clients. Rich people who trusted you with their retirement funds and college savings. When they find out what you've done with their money, they'll destroy you in civil court, not with hired muscle. Peter's hands were shaking now. Even if that's true, the money is still gone. I can't return what I've already spent. Then you'd better figure out how to get it back. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You have 48 hours to return every penny to my account. If you don't, I release everything I have to the SEC, the state attorney general, and every financial journalist in the city. And Lana, you're willing to destroy your own wife to get back at me? Lana made her choice when she decided to help you rob me. She can live with the consequences. Peter stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're making a mistake, Wes. A big one. The only mistake I made was trusting my wife. I won't make that error again. He stormed out of the cafe, leaving me alone with my coffee and my thoughts. Through the window, I watched him get into his car, a new BMW that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Even facing financial ruin, Peter Bowen couldn't resist showing off his wealth. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Drop the investigation or face the consequences. I screenshot the message and added it to my evidence file. If Peter wanted to play the intimidation game, he was welcome to try. But he'd picked the wrong target. I'd spent my entire career protecting systems from people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. People who believed they could find shortcuts, exploit weaknesses, take what didn't belong to them. Peter Bowen was just another hacker, and I was very good at stopping hackers. The beauty of being an IT security consultant is that you learn to think like the people you're trying to stop. You understand their motivations, their methods, their weaknesses. Most importantly, you learn that the best defense is often a devastating offense. Peter wanted to play psychological warfare. I could do that. I started with his professional reputation. A few carefully placed phone calls to contacts in the financial industry, sharing my concerns about irregularities I'd noticed in Peter's recent behavior. Nothing actionable, nothing that could be traced back to me, just the kind of whispered doubts that spread through professional networks like wildfire. By noon, I'd planted seeds of suspicion with 3 major investment firms and 2 financial journalists. Not enough to trigger an immediate investigation, but sufficient to ensure that when the SEC finally moved, there would be plenty of people ready to say they'd seen the warning signs. Next, I turned my attention to Lana. She'd been careful about covering her tracks, but 15 years of marriage had taught me her patterns. I knew her passwords, her favorite coffee shop, her preferred routes to work. More importantly, I knew her weaknesses. Lana was vain about her professional image. She'd built her career in public relations on the foundation of being trustworthy, discreet, someone who could be relied upon to handle sensitive information. If that reputation was damaged, her client base would evaporate overnight. I crafted an anonymous email and sent it to 3 of her biggest clients, suggesting they might want to review their contracts in light of some concerning personal developments in Lana's life. Nothing specific, nothing that could be proven, just enough doubt to make them nervous. The response was immediate. By 2 o'clock, Lana was calling me in tears. What did you do? Margaret Henley just fired me. She said there were questions about my judgment and reliability. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Wes. This has your fingerprints all over it. My fingerprints are on a lot of things, Lana. Like the joint account you helped Peter rob, for instance. I told you, that money will be returned. When? Soon. Peter just needs time to liquidate some assets. Peter doesn't have assets to liquidate. His fund is bankrupt, and he's been using client money to pay his personal expenses for months. There was a long silence. That's not... He said the SEC thing was just a routine audit. He lied to you, Lana, just like he's been lying to his clients, just like you've been lying to me. I never meant for it to go this far. What did you mean? What was the original plan? Another pause. We were going to take just enough to cover Peter's immediate problems. Maybe 50,000, then we'd put it back before you noticed. But 50,000 wasn't enough, was it? No, his debts were bigger than he'd told me. I felt a strange mixture of anger and pity. Lana had always been susceptible to confident men with big promises. In college, it had been charming. In our marriage, it had been manageable. But Peter had exploited that weakness to turn her into an accomplice in her own financial destruction. How long have you been sleeping with him? I asked. It's not about that. How long, Lana? 6 months, maybe 7. And the plan to steal our money? 3 months. But Wes, you have to believe me, I never wanted to hurt you. You just wanted to rob me blind and destroy my credit. Totally different thing. I was going to leave you anyway. The money was just insurance. Insurance against having to split our assets fairly in a divorce. Insurance against being left with nothing while you kept everything. I almost laughed. Left with nothing? Lana, we have joint ownership of everything. The house, the investments, the business accounts. In a normal divorce, you'd get half of everything we built together. Peter said you'd find ways to hide assets to make sure I got as little as possible. Peter said a lot of things, apparently, most of them lies. My call waiting beeped. Another unknown number. I need to take this, I told Lana. But think about what I said. Peter has been playing you from the beginning. I switched lines. Hello? Mr. Farrow, this is Detective Martinez with the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to speak with you about some irregularities in your banking records. My stomach dropped. What kind of irregularities? Large transfers, possible identity theft. Can you come down to the station this afternoon? Of course. But, Detective, I should mention that I've been investigating these irregularities myself. I believe my wife and her associate have been attempting to defraud me. That's interesting. Yes, please come in as soon as possible. And Mr. Farrow, bring any documentation you have about these transactions. I hung up and immediately called Lana back. What did Peter do? I demanded. What do you mean? The police just called. They want to talk to me about suspicious banking activity. I don't know anything about that. Lana, if Peter has set me up for something, if he's trying to make it look like I'm the one committing fraud, he wouldn't do that, wouldn't he? Think about it. If the police believe I'm the one who moved our money illegally, then Peter gets to keep it and you get to play the innocent victim. Very convenient. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, processing the implications. Oh, God, she whispered. What have I done? You've been played by an expert, Lana. The question now is whether you're going to help me fix this, or whether you're going to let Peter destroy both of us. The silence stretched between us, filled with 15 years of shared history and the wreckage of whatever trust we'd once had. What do you need me to do? She finally asked. Meet me at the police station in 1 hour, and Lana, bring everything Peter gave you. Every document, every instruction, every promise he made, because if we're going down, he's going down with us. The police station smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Detective Martinez was a compact woman in her 40s with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen every variation of human greed and stupidity. She led Lana and me into a small conference room lined with filing cabinets and motivational posters about community safety. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Detective Martinez said, spreading our banking records across the table. Mr. Bowen gained access to your joint account and transferred $250,000 to an offshore account with your wife's assistance. That's correct, I replied. And Mrs. Farrow, you're confirming that you provided Mr. Bowen with the account information and access codes? Lana nodded miserably. He said it was temporary, that he'd return the money within a few days. But instead, he's moved the funds through multiple accounts to make them untraceable. Detective Martinez pulled out a thick folder. What's interesting is that Mr. Bowen contacted us this morning with a very different story. What kind of story? He claims that you, Mr. Farrow, have been embezzling money from your corporate clients and using your joint account to launder the proceeds. According to his statement, your wife discovered the illegal activity and was trying to protect the legitimate funds by moving them to a secure account. I stared at the detective in disbelief. That's completely fabricated. He provided documentation to support his claims. Bank records showing irregular deposits to your business account, emails allegedly from you discussing the need to clean certain transactions. Those emails are fake. The deposits are payments from legitimate clients. Can you prove that? I opened my laptop bag and pulled out a thick folder of my own. Every contract, every invoice, every payment authorization for the past 2 years, all legitimate business transactions with verifiable corporate clients. Detective Martinez examined the documents while I explained my side of the story. The evidence was overwhelming. Peter's scheme fell apart under basic scrutiny. The fake emails contained technical errors that no real IT professional would make. The timeline of events made it clear that Peter had been planning the theft for months. There's something else, Lana said quietly. Peter made me sign some documents. He said they were just formalities, but... She pulled a manila envelope from her purse and handed it to Detective Martinez. Inside were several legal forms, including a power of attorney that would have given Peter control over our assets and a sworn statement claiming I'd been behaving erratically and making threats. He had me sign these weeks ago, Lana explained. He said they were just insurance, in case you tried to retaliate when we filed for divorce. Detective Martinez studied the documents with growing interest. Mrs. Farrow, these papers would have given Mr. Bowen legal authority to control your finances. If he'd filed them with the court, along with his fraud allegations, he could have frozen all your assets pending investigation. The full scope of Peter's plan was becoming clear. He hadn't just stolen our money, he'd been preparing to destroy me completely. frame me for embezzlement, have me arrested, then use the legal system to seize whatever assets remained. "Where is Mr. Bowen now?" I asked. "That's an excellent question," Detective Martinez replied. "He was supposed to come in this afternoon to provide additional evidence for his claims. He never showed up." My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number again? "Airport, Terminal B, Gate 23. Come alone or the money disappears forever." I showed the message to Detective Martinez. She frowned and picked up her phone. "This is Martinez. I need units at the airport, Terminal B. Suspect may be attempting to flee?" She turned back to us. "Mr. Farrow, I strongly advise you not to meet with Mr. Bowen. We'll handle this through proper channels." "With respect, Detective, Peter has had hours to move that money beyond recovery. If there's a chance to get it back, it's too dangerous. He's desperate, and desperate people make unpredictable choices." I understood her concern, but I also understood Peter. He was a narcissist who believed he was smarter than everyone around him. Even now, facing exposure and arrest, he couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat over his victory. "What if I wore a wire? You could monitor the conversation, move in if things went wrong." Detective Martinez considered this. "It's highly irregular. So is stealing $250,000 and framing the victim for embezzlement." 20 minutes later, I was walking through airport security with a recording device taped to my chest and an earpiece that connected me to a surveillance team. Peter was exactly where he'd said he'd be, sitting in the departure lounge with a boarding pass in his hand and a smug expression on his face. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said as I approached. "Where's my money, Peter?" "Safe, secure, and completely beyond your reach." He held up his phone, showing what appeared to be a banking app. "One touch of this button, and it transfers to an account in a country that doesn't have extradition treaties with the United States. The police know everything. Lana gave them the documents you had her sign." Peter's confidence wavered slightly. "Lana doesn't understand the bigger picture. Enlighten me." "You never deserved her, Wes. You never appreciated what you had. I gave her a chance at a real life with someone who could provide for her properly. By stealing from her husband? By liberating assets that were being wasted on your middle-class mediocrity." Through my earpiece, I heard Detective Martinez's voice. "Keep him talking. We're moving into position." "So, what's the plan now, Peter? You fly off into the sunset with our money, and Lana takes the blame for helping you steal it?" "Lana made her choices. I offered her the chance to come with me, but she's too weak to follow through." "Too weak or too smart to trust you?" Peter's face darkened. "You have no idea what you've cost me. The SEC investigation, the client lawsuits, the professional humiliation. I had everything under control until you started digging. You had nothing under control. You're a fraud and a thief, and now everyone knows it." He stood up abruptly, his finger hovering over his phone screen. "Say goodbye to your money, Wes." "I don't think so." Detective Martinez appeared from behind a nearby pillar, her badge visible and her hand resting on her service weapon. "Mr. Bowen, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and attempted extortion." Peter looked around wildly, realizing he was surrounded by plainclothes officers. His finger moved toward the phone screen, but I was faster. 20 years of reflexes honed by competitive gaming served me well as I knocked the device from his hand. The phone skittered across the floor and came to rest at Detective Martinez's feet. She picked it up and handed it to one of the technical specialists who'd been monitoring our conversation. "Mr. Bowen," she said, pulling out handcuffs, "you have the right to remain silent." As they led Peter away, he turned back to me with pure hatred in his eyes. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over since the moment you underestimated me." 3 hours later, I was back home with Lana, sitting in our kitchen while technical specialists worked to trace and recover our stolen funds. The money was recoverable. Peter's threats had been mostly bluster. His offshore accounts were accessible to law enforcement, and his cryptocurrency transfers could be reversed. "What happens now?" Lana asked. "Now you decide what kind of person you want to be," I replied. "Someone who takes responsibility for her choices, or someone who blames everyone else for her problems." "I'm sorry, Wes, for all of it." "Sorry doesn't fix 15 years of marriage, Lana. Sorry doesn't undo the betrayal." "I know, but maybe we could try counseling. Maybe we could work through this." I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was beautiful, intelligent, capable of great kindness when she chose to be. She was also selfish, manipulative, and willing to destroy the people who loved her when it served her purposes. "No," I said finally. "We're done. Wes, you made your choice when you decided to help Peter rob me, You made it again when you signed those documents. You made it every day for 7 months when you lied to my face about the affair. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood we'd shared for a decade. I'll give you a fair divorce, Lana. Half of everything, just like the law requires. But I won't give you another chance to betray me. She was crying now, but I felt nothing. The man who'd loved her unconditionally was gone, replaced by someone harder and infinitely more careful about trust. My phone rang. Detective Martinez. Mr. Farrow? I thought you'd want to know. We've recovered 97% of your funds. The rest should be back in your account within 48 hours. Thank you, Detective. There's something else. Mr. Bowen is talking. It seems your case isn't the only one. We're looking at a pattern of fraud going back several years. I wasn't surprised. Men like Peter didn't stop with one victim. They kept escalating until someone finally stopped them. Will you need me to testify? Almost certainly, but Mr. Farrow, you did good work here. Most people in your situation would have just accepted the loss and moved on. After I hung up, I sat in my office and opened a new document on my computer. Not a manipulation journal this time, but something different. A record of lessons learned, patterns recognized, trust rebuilt one careful step at a time. The first entry was simple. Never again. The second was more complex. Trust is earned through consistent actions over time, not promised through words in moments of crisis. The third was a reminder. The best revenge is living well, but sometimes you have to fight for the right to do so. I saved the document and closed my laptop. Tomorrow I'd start rebuilding my life. Tonight I'd allow myself to feel satisfied that justice had been served and that Peter Bowen would never again mistake kindness for weakness. Outside it was starting to rain. I watched the water streak down the windows and wash away the dust of a very long day.